Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Holyoke Public Schools finalist interviews for the role of superintendent. Calling this meeting to order at 6:31. Roll call, Ms. Feliciano.
Mayor Garcia. Dr. Rivera-Colod.
Present.
Mr. Sheehan.
Present.
Ms. LaFave.
Present.
Ms. LeBron Martinez.
Here.
Ms. Tenzie Williams.
Aquí.
Mr. Izaza.
Present.
Mr. Michelson.
Here.
And Ms. Lubeau.
Here.
Ms. Wilson.
Present.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed via Zoom and Boxcast. Good evening and welcome to Holyoke High School North Campus. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this important milestone as Holyoke Public Schools continues its transition from state receivership to local control. Before we begin, I would like to note that translation services are available for anyone who may need them this evening. There is a check-in table in the lobby where headsets for live translation are available. Antes de comenzar, queremos informarles que hay servicios de traducción disponibles para quienes los necesiten esta noche. En el vestíbulo hay una mesa de registro donde pueden recoger audífonos para la traducción en vivo. The superintendent search process began over a year ago, when the school committee initiated work to refine the job description and posting materials in collaborations with members of the community through the Community Advisory Board. This past September, the school committee conducted a request for proposals and selected the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, or MASC, to serve as our search facilitator. MASC then conducted a series of listening sessions to gather feedback and data from stakeholders across the community to help guide the school committee's work. In November, the official job posting was released, and applicants applied through MASC with the application period closing in mid-December. The school committee then formed a screening committee composed of school community members, residents, and other stakeholders. Working alongside MASC, the screening committee reviewed applications and invited candidates to participate in interviews in January. These interviews were conducted in executive session and were not open to the public. A total of 9 candidates applied for the position. From that pool, 5 candidates were selected for screening interviews, and from those interviews, the committee identified 3 finalists. These 3 finalists are the candidates being interviewed, and tonight is our last night of interviews. Once the finalists were determined, the school committee also conducted multiple reference checks last week to gain additional insight into each candidate's leadership experience and professional strengths. This week represents the culminating phase of the superintendent search process. The finalists spent today in the district meeting with individuals they selected to help prepare for this evening's interview. The school committee has developed 10 interview questions, which were created in a public meeting. For consistency and fairness, the same questions were asked each evening, and each question will be posed by the same committee member. Candidates are not subject to a strict time limit when responding. The school committee may ask follow-up questions related to a candidate's response, and the timing and number of follow-up questions will be determined by me as chair. I respectfully ask that members of the audience refrain from clapping during the interview itself and hold applause until the conclusion. The candidates began their day at approximately 8:30 this morning, and it has been a full day of engagement in our district. The school committee would also like to take a moment to thank Interim Superintendent Anthony Soto for his leadership, service, and dedication to Holyoke Public Schools during this critical period in our transition back to local control. Following this final interview, the school committee will deliberate here in the auditorium. We will openly discuss the qualities we're seeking in our next superintendent, each candidate's qualifications, and the results of site visits and reference checks. We intend to take a vote this evening on the selection of the next superintendent with a start date of July 1st, 2026, pending successful contract negotiations. The school committee has previously determined that a candidate must receive a minimum of 6 votes to be selected as superintendent. We will now begin with candidate Annie Azarloza. At this time, I invite the audience to please welcome the candidate to the stage with a round of applause.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please begin by briefly introducing yourself and summarizing your professional journey. Then tell us what specifically inspired you to apply for the superintendent position in Holyoke, and what about the community and this moment in its history resonates with you.
Thank you for the question. I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. Okay. Thank you for the question. First of all, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I had a wonderful day today in the district, and so I'm humbled and grateful to be here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself on a personal level. I was born and raised in Los Angeles to amazing Cuban immigrant parents who came to this country with nothing, but with everything that mattered. Values rooted in education, hard work, and taking care of one another. From the start, I was navigating 2 worlds, home and school, and I learned that schools are very powerful places. They can open doors wide, or they can quietly shut them. And that has really stayed with me, and that's why the work matters. I'm pivoting now to my trajectory, my professional trajectory. I began teaching in Miami, middle school social studies in a community that was 99% Latinx. I moved to Massachusetts in 2006 into a community that was 80% students of color, with a relatively large population of English language learners. There I taught at every level, elementary, middle, and high school, and I also had the privilege to serve as a principal at all 3 levels as well. I moved into district leadership and was a district director. I was assistant superintendent, and I also served as interim superintendent during the 2020 school year, which we know was probably the most difficult school year to be in education. And I remember, like many leaders, I remember thinking, well, I'll never do this again, and here I am. Wanting to lead on a larger scale, I moved to Worcester and I became the Chief Academic Support Officer. And I oversaw special education, social emotional learning, nursing, family and community engagement, positive youth development, and discipline across all 50 schools. Most recently, I served as superintendent in Rochester, and I am currently the interim superintendent in the North Country, just about an hour away from Canada, where it's very cold, my first experience in rural education. I'm eager to return back home to Massachusetts, which really brings me to Holyoke. I grew up in an urban environment. I went to college and spent 17 years in an urban environment. I have spent 20 years of my educational career serving urban communities. It's where I thrive as a leader. This work is also deeply personal to me. I was raised by immigrants. Spanish is my first language, and I learned early how to navigate schools not built for you, how to translate for your family, how to prove your belonging, and how to carry adult responsibility before you're ready. Those experiences didn't just shape who I am, they shape how I lead. I don't have to imagine the children and families from Holyoke. I know this work from the inside. And what draws me to Holyoke in this very moment is, Holyoke isn't asking if it will survive. You've already proved it. Holyoke is asking what comes next. You've already lived through state intervention. You've already done the hard work of stabilization. Now comes the next chapter, and that's building. And that's my lane, and that's why I'm here tonight. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Isaza.
Holyoke is a community with deep assets and persistent challenges, emerging now from state receivership and recommitted to local control. Why do you want to lead Holyoke Public Schools at this moment? And what are the 2 to 3 most important priorities you would pursue in your first 1 to 3 years to improve outcomes for students? How will you make the Holyoke school system a model for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Thank you for that question. Holyoke becomes a model for the Commonwealth when you turn values into systems. And what I mean by that is districts often name powerful values, right? For example, equity and excellence, student-centeredness, human-centeredness. But unless those values are embedded into everything that we do, our hiring practices, how we train, how we allocate resources, how we make decisions, they just remain aspirations and not lived experiences for our children. Turning values into systems means if we value equity, our curriculum, our interventions, and our staffing model should reflect that. And if we value student voice, then we have ongoing structures where students inform decisions. Excuse me. Right now in New Hampshire, I'm actually turning values into systems so that progress can survive leadership turnover. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Belonging in agency is one of our values. And so what I've done there is I've created an educator advisory council so that every person in a district, right, that has their fingerprints on the success of a child has a seat at the table. I've also created the Superintendent Student Advisory Council because I want to make sure our youth has a direct line to me. And the third thing that I created was a family and community engagement roundtable because I want to build meaningful and authentic relationships with our families. And the second value that we're turning into systems is shared responsibility. And what I did there was I redesigned cabinet to function as a cross-functional team rather than a collection of departments, breaking down silos so that we make sure that operations, finance, instruction, student services, and technology, we own student success. When values turn into systems, progress doesn't depend on individual leaders, because if progress only happens when Annie's pushing it, that's not real progress. And then when we talk about local control doesn't mean that everyone gets to do their own thing. Local control means that the school committee sets the direction, and then the district then puts it into action. Make sure that the schools and everywhere that direction is felt. Holyoke has emerged from state leadership, from state receivership. You've stabilized, you've done the hard work stabilizing the system, and now the work is sustaining local control and accelerating outcomes. And so going back to part of the question, which is, what are my first 1, 2, 3 priorities in the first couple of years? What I want to do first is, and I know a lot of people say this, but I do want to listen and learn. I really want to build relationships. And it's really important too. Clearly you've done the stabilization. I want to see how we're operationalizing our strategic plan. And what I mean by that is this. Do we have a shared definition of what student success is, right? Clear enough to guide our decisions and strong enough to hold us accountable, even when those decisions are hard. And then instructional coherent systems, so that a child's learning doesn't depend on what class they land in. And is everyone learning, right? Is there adult development going on across our district? Because we know that when educators grow, our students grow. And equally important is transparent governance and role clarity, so that the school committee governs and then administration leads. And so that's a mindset that I'd bring to Holyoke, because when values live inside systems, they stop being statements on paper and start becoming experiences that our children feel every day. Thank you for that question.
Ms. Lobo.
Holyoke serves a predominantly diverse community, including Latino, special education, English language learners, and students with significant social and economic challenges. And our community holds both equity and high expectations as core values. How has your experience working with students and families facing systemic barriers shaped your leadership? Please provide an example.
Thank you for that question. So across the communities that I've served, I've seen children arrive with curiosity, ability, ambition, and still been underestimated due to language, background, or circumstance. And so equity isn't a buzzword for me. It's a promise. We don't lower the bar, we build the bridge. I focus on dismantling what I believe is the most dangerous systemic barrier in education. And that's when supports unintentionally reduce students' access to grade level content. Sometimes the barrier isn't poverty or language or circumstance. It's how we design systems. And I've seen what happens when we design systems differently. I'll give you an example. In a previous district, we implemented a co-teaching and push-in model for our multilingual learners so that they were receiving their language services while not losing out on core instruction. Because of the intersectionality between our students with disabilities and our multilingual learners, the key byproduct of that was that we saw improved outcomes for both subgroups because learning really became inclusive by design. When multilingual learners remain in their classrooms, accessing core instruction, having multiple opportunities to practice the target language with their peers, it improves outcomes, clearly. Now, that didn't happen overnight. That took some time. That took adult development, that took consistent implementation, and there are no shortcuts to systems work. Equity isn't about moving the bar. It's about making sure that we build the system so that the students can reach it. I'll give you another brief example on how we provided access to high expectations to historically underserved students. In a prior district, we examined access to our AP courses. And what we determined was that our brown and black students were significantly underrepresented in those courses. And so what we did was we removed what I often refer to as gatekeeping practices. And so what I mean by that is an over-reliance on teacher recommendations or rigid prerequisite structures or single cutoff scores. And instead we said, instead of asking, are our students ready, we said, is our system ready? And so we opened up more access to our students, and more of our historically underserved students enrolled in these classes, and they thrived in these classes. And so that's what equity is. Equity with high expectations looks like. The bar stays high, and the system rises to meet the students. Thank you for that question.
Ms. Lefebvre.
So English learners and students with disabilities make up a significant portion of our district. Tell us about a time when you were responsible for improving literacy or numeracy outcomes for multilingual learners and our students with IEPs across multiple grades. What evidence-based approaches did you implement, and how did you hold central office and school leaders accountable for measurable progress?
Thank you for that question. Before I dive into numeracy and literacy, I start with creating the conditions that are conducive to learning, to teaching and learning. And I say this because if a student does not feel safe or engaged or known, the strongest instructional strategies won't matter. And if teachers don't feel valued and supported, instructional improvement just won't stick. And so in every role that I've held, I've learned that school climate is not separate from academic achievement. It's actually a prerequisite for it. When students trust the adults in the building, when they feel known, when they feel heard, when they feel a sense of belonging, they engage. And they persist through challenges. And when our educators have clarity, support, are valued, and are trusted, instructional improvement translates into academic achievement. And so for our multilingual learners and our students with disabilities, I focus on 2 instructional anchors. And that is what I just mentioned, which is making sure that they have access to core level or grade level content and also meaningful relevance. You know, students need to understand what they're learning, but also why they're learning it. In a previous district, I had mentioned that we did the co-teaching model for our multilingual learners, and so that our multilingual learners remained in the classroom accessing the core instruction. But they weren't just accessing the core instruction, they were accessing the rigor with their peers, they were analyzing texts, they were solving problems grounded in scenarios that they could see themselves in because it was culturally relevant curriculum. And so, you know, I often say relevance isn't enrichment, it's how learning sticks. And so multilingual learners and students with disabilities, they don't need different goals. They just need better design systems. And I'll give you a more, I'll drill down to numeracy and literacy and to give you exactly some examples of how I've improved those outcomes. In a previous district, we learned that our literacy curriculum was really not having, no longer having the intended impact. And this particular elementary school was K through 4. And so what we did was we engaged in an inclusive vetting process. We included multiple stakeholders at the table. We had a teacher from each of the grade levels. We had multilingual representation. We had students with disability teachers at the table. And we also had a guidance counselor at the table. And this wasn't just about choosing materials. This is really about making an informed, strategic decision that was aligned with our district's vision for teaching and learning. Of course, we wanted to make sure our curriculum was culturally relevant, it was evidence-based, it was rigorous, and so we did that for our literacy. And I'll let you know what we did after, but I'll first pivot for a second on what we did for math. Not at the same time, this is at a different time, but at the same school district. We were noticing in the middle school, and in our middle school in that district was grades 5 through 8, we were noticing that our students were having vastly different experiences from class to class and in the same grade level. Our demographics were shifting, and so we said, okay, it's time to engage in the same structured, inclusive vetting process. So very similar in the manner that we engaged in our literacy curriculum panel, we did the same thing for our math. Again, representatives from grade levels, special education representatives, multilingual representatives. We had a guidance counselor, and at the time we had a curriculum director. I was assistant superintendent at the time, so during that time, our curriculum director facilitated that committee. In the end, for our literacy, what we did for both programs, we piloted 2 curriculum programs. And the reason why we piloted 2 curriculum programs is because we want to gauge teacher comfort with the educational resource. We also want to make sure that our students engaging in it. And we also wanted to have enough time to have some quantitative data to make sure that it was having the intended impact. Ultimately, we chose CKLA, this was back in 2021, CKLA for our elementary, and we chose iReady for our middle school. And equally important is the PD, right? You can't just adopt a curriculum and say, here you go, teachers, right? We really have to develop a robust professional development plan. And what we did was, ideally, you want a summer component and then you want year-round professional learning. What we engaged in is a 2-year rollout plan, because natural attrition with retirement and teachers, moving, we wanted to make sure that our new teachers had access to professional development. And so robust professional development, and also apart from that, we created professional learning communities so that when teachers were trying this new curriculum and they were learning it, they had their peers there where they can celebrate highlights, they could talk about some challenges, they could learn from one another, and they were also looking at data collectively to adjust practice and drive instruction. And the great thing about that PLC is that it became our professional driver and making sure that there was instructional coherence across classrooms. How we monitored progress for those was we used NWEA MAP for reading and for math, and we also used Amplify and Dibbles in the early elementary grades. And very similar, I'm sure, to Holyoke, it's 3 times a year that we progress monitor. A key accountability lever that I use, excuse me, is we do instructional walkthroughs. So typically what that looks like is I do an instructional walkthrough with the assistant superintendent, and this is not evaluative. What we're doing is we need to calibrate. I need to calibrate to make sure that we are on the same page as far as what does strong teaching look like. Are students engaged? Are students taking risks academically? what do the relationships look like with students and with teachers? And once that occurs, once I do that with the assistant superintendent then takes the baton and does it with the principals, because it's very important for us to calibrate on what does strong instruction look like and feel like. So accountability works when everyone's looking at the same thing. And then when the system is right for multilingual learners and students with disabilities, they don't just grow, they accelerate. Thank you for that question.
A follow-up question by Ms. Lugo.
So we have 1 in 3 students who are on IEPs, and we have a significant number of families who leave the district to get special education services outside.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So, can you hear me now? I feel like we're on a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 1 in 3 students who are on IEPs in our system. And we have a significant number of families who leave out of district to get services for their special education students. And we have another who choose to not come to our district at all. And what I'm wondering is, what would you do to change the special education landscape in our community, because we have teachers who do not have the supports in the classroom. General education teachers do not have the education in the classroom. So what would you do differently?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So a couple of things. Certainly professional development, we have to grow, we have to build our capacity of our teachers in service of our students. But to get back to what you had mentioned also about, we are out-of-district students, not being able to service them in our district. What I can tell you, I can give you a concrete example of what I've done currently in New Hampshire. There were no specialized programs in New Hampshire in the district that I serve, and we were also sending students out of district because we weren't able to service them. And so we created a specialized program. We had to get permission from the state to do it for our nonverbal autistic children, because we wanted to make sure that it's really important for me that our children are serviced in our community with their peers, with inclusion opportunities, whether they eat lunch with their peers or they engage in their specials with their peers. And so we created this program that will launch next year for our students to bring them back home. It's just really important for us to have our students here. Although in Massachusetts, we can go to these communities that are servicing our children, and we can visit them, and we don't have to even announce when we're coming. We can enhance their programs. It's their programs. So it's really important for us to have these programs under our roof so that we can enhance them, make them better, and bring our children back home with their community so that they're learning with their peers.
Just for context, what is the population of the district?
Say it again.
What is the population of the district you're referring to?
Oh, it's very small. The population in the district is 500 students. It's a rural education. Yeah.
Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. Improving teaching and learning requires both strong curriculum systems and professional trust. How do you balance centralized curriculum coherence with teacher autonomy? And what feedback loops would you put in place to ensure instructional quality is improving across classrooms and schools?
Thank you for that question. Curriculum coherence and teacher autonomy aren't competing values. In unstable systems, they can be framed that way, and that's when they both fail. But my role is to make sure that I'm clear on the destination and the guardrails. And then I trust educators and give them the professional space to do what they do best. In practice, that means teachers deserve autonomy and students deserve consistency. Those aren't competing values, those are complementary. Coherence means a guaranteed standards-aligned curriculum that every student can access grade level to content. Common expectations for rigor across all class, shared definition of what strong instruction looks like, and consistent integrated supports for multilingual learners and students with disabilities. And then when we think about autonomy, teachers choose instructional strategies because they know their students best. They build strong relationships and they build class culture. And teacher teams use data to drive instruction and adjust practice. And innovation is always encouraged. My role isn't to script teachers. My role is to create clarity, remove barriers, make sure that good teaching, strong teaching happens across our district and not just in pockets. We never want to be a district of schools. We want to be a school district. And the feedback loops that I use are very similar to what I had mentioned previously, are the instructional walkthroughs, again, to identify what's strong, and again, it's just to calibrate. We're using that calibration to drive professional learning and for targeted supports. And we also use, obviously, data as a flashlight, never to weaponize. What we're doing is, how do we support? How do we adjust? Do we need to pivot, or do we stay the course? We listen to students carefully because students know exactly how they learn. They know what gets in the way of their learning. And those conversations are much more powerful than a spreadsheet. And finally, principals work as a team. So in two of my previous districts, we've had principal learning communities that focus on instructional leadership and not just operations, so that they're learning alongside with their teachers. I can share in a previous district what I've done. We redesigned the scope and sequence and learning progressions across grades. We brought people together, teachers, leaders, and we built a shared understanding of the learning progression. We used the backwards design model, to make sure that we knew exactly what we wanted the students to know at the end of each grade level. And conversations are powerful because it really takes curriculum out of the binders and puts it in practice. And then from there, we invested heavily on collaboration, vertical PLCs, horizontal PLCs, and those PLCs really became where curriculum actually lives. We looked at student data, we looked at student work, and we adjusted the pace and instruction to drive instruction. What I've learned is that curriculum doesn't work when it's mandated. Teachers will engage in that curriculum when they believe in it, when they understand it, and when they are supported. And that's how you build coherence across grades, and that's how students experience learning as a journey and not a series of restarts.
Mr. Michelson.
Chronic absenteeism and concerns about discipline continue to affect student success in Holyoke. Give an example of how you addressed chronic absenteeism and school climate challenges in a prior role. How did you balance restorative practices with accountability, and what impact did your approach have on student engagement or attendance?
Thank you for that question. I entered a previous district that was facing a crisis on multiple fronts. They had poor academic performance, they had chronic absenteeism, they had low graduation rates, they had disengaged families, they had fractured union relations. And after following my listening and learning tour, what I wanted, it's very tempting to attack on all fronts, but that's not the smart thing to do. And so what we did was, after my listening and learning tour, we identified the one leverage point that really touches upon each of those in order to move the needle, and it was discipline. What I learned in that community was that alternatives to suspensions, this is New Hampshire, became law in New Hampshire in 2022, and we hadn't yet implemented those alternatives to suspensions. So the first thing we did was, let's get this district into compliance with state and federal discipline laws. Compliance is the floor to growth. It is not the ceiling to growth. And so we engaged in that work, and we also, that alone reduced the suspensions, which was great. We kept students in school learning and accessing their grade level content, but we also knew that wouldn't fix the climate. And during my listening and learning tour and during conversations with the educators and our families and our youth, we learned that classrooms were overwhelmed by escalating behaviors, and teachers felt unsupported, fueling burnout and driving morale down. And rather than doubling down on punitive discipline, what we did was we had to invest in the root. And so what we did was we created these wellness spaces housed by trained instructors, and so that when the child was in crisis in a classroom, the child could get what they need, which is to reflect and regulate and then reintegrate in this wellness space with the trained instructor. That gave the child what they needed, and it also gave the teacher the reprieve they needed to continue teaching. When staff saw that we were listening and we were investing in real solutions, it reset our relationship with the union. Over time, the district came out of the highest suspension rate in the state. Our chronic absenteeism was reduced, and for the first time in multiple years, academic performance improved across all subjects. And so, that's how I lead. I don't just set priorities. I sequence them, I root them in systemic need, I build the structures for real sustainable change. It's not about doing 30 initiatives at once. It's about doing the right work at the right time with the right level of intensity to shift the entire system. Thank you for that question.
Ms. Tensley Williams?
Good evening, Ms. Annie, and my question to you is, Holyoke has experienced significant teacher and staff turnover for many years. How would you diagnose the root causes of retention challenges, and what specific steps would you take to stabilize the workforce, rebuild morale, and work productively with unions while still advancing necessary reforms?
Thank you for that question. I can tell you great teachers don't follow job postings. They follow leadership that creates the conditions that are conducive to teaching and learning. That's why I focus less on recruitment tactics and more on the conditions that drive away educators. You need strong onboarding, you need strong mentoring and induction programs because we have to set teachers up for success when we hire them. But if teachers can't teach because they don't feel heard or if they feel overwhelmed, they won't stay. Let me give you an example. I held some listening sessions in a previous district, and teachers, and this is the second district, named the intensity of the behaviors that was really making it nearly impossible for them to teach. And rather than defaulting to purely punitive discipline, what we did was we addressed the root cause. What we never want to do is we don't want to, what's that game, the whack-a-mole, right? We don't want to be doing this all the time. We don't want to be living in firefighter mode. We really have to get to a space where we are working proactively. And so what we did in this particular instance, through my conversations with the Educator Advisory Council, and the union, which we would meet on a monthly basis, we secured school-based clinicians with a community partner to provide mental health supports to our students. And this was a cost-neutral solution because it was actually no fiscal impact to our budget. Morale improves when adults see that feedback turns into action. When they see small, visible wins paired with long-term planning, trust is rebuilt. Strong teachers choose district where leadership removes barriers and does not add them. And when teachers teach because they are supported and because they are heard, they stay and they bring others with them. Thank you for that question.
Ms. LaRue Martinez?
Thank you. Many families and residents, both with and without children in the schools, have felt disaffected and disconnected from district decision-making. Describe an example of how you rebuild trust or engagement in a community where confidence in the school system was low. What action did you take, and how did you know engagement became meaningful?
Thank you for that question. Family and community engagement is a leadership responsibility. It matters because schools don't educate children in isolation. Every child comes to our community carrying the reality of their home, their background, and their culture. And I can tell you, family and community engagement does not happen from behind a desk. It does not happen with monthly newsletters. It does not happen with one-time forums. It happens, trust is built with intentional, ongoing structures, earned through presence, listening, and learning, and following through. You can't close opportunity gaps unless you close trust gaps. In a prior district where the confidence was very low in the system, I was very intentional about changing how we engage with families to make sure that it was authentic engagement. Again, we never want to have performative, right? We don't want to check off a box. We want to make sure that we're meaningfully engaging with families. So we started the Family and Community Engagement Roundtable. And the goal there was to get us out of that crisis mode and into a standing, predictable forum where families really help to shape decisions. Families saw the input directly influence decisions because we had embarked on redistricting in the district. This particular district is 33,000 residents, and there's about 3,700 students. And we were opening a brand new school the following year. And so it's a very heavy lift, the redistricting, and they were a big part of that decision-making. And they saw that their feedback was influencing decisions. And not only that, they also helped rename our new elementary school that was opened the following year. And so once that structure was in place, a lot of times there are families that might say, well, a family and community engagement roundtable at a building facility sounds kind of formal. I'm not sure if I want to go. And so I really want to make sure that we're providing access to all of our families. So apart from the family and community engagement roundtable, we did a fireside chat. And the fireside chat was, the format was very deliberate. No mic, no podium, no performative Q&A. It was just a conversation. And it was meant to humanize district leadership and to break down hierarchy. And it was really wonderful. And we held it at a restaurant where anybody was welcome to come. Community members, families, educators could come. And it was a great experience. I knew engagement had become meaningful when the tone shifted. When frustration turned into problem solving. When they saw that I was sitting at the table and I was rolling up my sleeves and we were partnering and we were working together, we knew at that point that we were true partners. And the other thing is when people start saying, you know what, I may not agree with the decisions, but I know how they're being made and I trust the process, that's when you know you're meaningfully engaging with families. And that's the work that I do. I don't just talk about collaboration. I build the systems to sustain it. And that's how trust is rebuilt, and that's how priorities move, and that is the leadership that I would bring to Holyoke. Thank you.
Holyoke Public Schools operates in a fiscally constrained environment in a district that is funded at the minimum net school spending requirement. How would you align the budget with instructional priorities, maintain transparency with the school committee and the public, and ensure clear, respectful roles between governance and administration? How would you seek the necessary financial resources to ensure excellence in education for all of our students?
Thank you for that question. I remember the then Deputy Superintendent of Worcester saying to me, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. Because in a fiscally constrained environment, your budget is not just a financial document. It's really the clearest expression of your district's values and priorities. And in Holyoke, if you want to sustain local control and avoid future state involvement, it's not about looking for money elsewhere. It's really about using what we have in ways that align with our values, because values should drive priorities. And so carrying out district priorities does require discipline, because when everything's important, nothing's important. And so what I do is I align every initiative, no matter how well-intentioned, to three questions. First and foremost, is it aligned to our strategic plan? If it is, do teachers have the capacity to execute it well? And if not, what do they need, right? What support do they need? And thirdly, do we have the means, fiscally speaking? And if not, can we be creative with our budgets if that's to be the focus? If the initiative doesn't pass that test, it gets set aside, it gets reshaped, or it gets paused. And I pair that clarity with transparency, because I do not believe that budgets should feel like black boxes. I work closely with the school committee to explain what we're funding, why we're funding it, what problem we're trying to solve, the metrics we're going to use to determine if we're making a positive impact. Clear governance roles are essential to maintaining local control. The school committee sets the direction, and the district designs and executes the plan. When those roles are respected, the system is stable, and the state is looking for stability. The state is not looking for perfection. We are all imperfect. State intervention occurs when the systems are incoherent, unpredictable, or reactive. And then to expand those resources, I don't engage in short-term fixes. I don't believe in short-term fixes. I really pursue funding that are aligned with our strategic plan through targeted grants or partnerships. And I can give you a couple of examples that I've done that. In Worcester, we partnered with the community mental health agencies to secure school-based clinicians for our students in our middle school and high school. And currently, where I am right now, we are partnering with the Healthy Kids program to provide summer school, summer enrichment, and after-school programming next year. And so, partnering is certainly important with our local partners and our community partners, and also looking inward as well. Oftentimes, we have unfilled positions that sometimes they're just carried over from year to year, and they're not filled for whatever reason. They may not be needed. And so I look at those positions as a way to repurpose in a way that meets our current needs. And then reinvesting savings also into areas that directly impact our students. Ultimately, what prevents future state involvement isn't a single line item. It's capacity to plan, capacity to execute, capacity to adjust practice, monitor progress, and change direction if necessary. When a district can demonstrate that its values are embedded into the system, that governance and administration are aligned, that the budget reflects its priorities, the message is clear to the Commonwealth. The district is in control of its future. Thank you for that question.
Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you. Leadership often involves making difficult decisions, especially early in a new role. Please describe a time when you made a decision and upon reflection was not the best choice for your school or team. What factors influenced your decision, and how did you respond to feedback or consequences, and what did you learn from the experience?
Thank you for that question. One of the most formative leadership experiences came in a prior district when I took a position that was unpopular and unavoidable. And I don't take courageous positions lightly. I knew there was no option that avoided conflict. I knew that every path carried consequences. But leadership for me has never been about doing what's easiest or doing what's most popular. It's doing what's right for kids. I can tell you that when the pressure is high, my compass does not move. What made this experience especially challenging was that I was navigating real pressure to act outside of ethical and legal boundaries. So what I did was I slowed the moment down. I anchored the work in compliance. I sought school counsel to make sure that I was interpreting the law correctly. I held the line, and even though it came with resistance and personal cost. What I learned from this experience is this: resistance isn't always opposition. Sometimes it's attachment to a familiar practice. In this district, much of the tension was coming from a few that wanted to preserve practices that were no longer aligned with the law and were no longer best for children. In hindsight, what I would have done is I would have re-anchored the work in the leadership candidate profile. What I mean by that is this particular district had undergone a superintendent search very similar to Holyoke, with focus groups and with surveys. And what they determined in their leadership profile was that they wanted a change agent. They wanted a bold leader that would not simply keep the district operating, but would move it forward. I think naming that dynamic sooner and re-anchoring that work in that, and acknowledging the sense of loss that comes from letting go of something familiar would have helped ground the work earlier, even though we were still moving forward. That experience tested my integrity like no other experience ever has, and it reinforced it. It taught me that when the ground beneath me is shaking, to stay put. It taught me to be a more thoughtful change leader. It taught me to be more intentional or more attentive to the human side of transformation and not just the technical side. I don't shy away from hard calls, but I'm much more intentional about naming transitions and surfacing attachment. That experience didn't hard me. I actually learned that people can be committed to children and still struggle to let go of what's familiar, and that naming that matters. Sometimes people just need to grieve what they're leaving behind, even if the future is better. Thank you for that question.
Follow-up question by Mr. Sheehan.
Superintendents are routinely entrusted with confidential information. Please address the allegations that you violated confidentiality agreement. Explain your actions and describe how you will ensure accountability and adherence to these processes in the future and how it relates to your leadership practice.
Thank you for that question. So I want everyone to know that I do not have an NDA, so I did not violate confidentiality. It's very clear that I have been, it's public information, that I have been seeking the release of my investigative report in Rochester as a private citizen and in a right-to-know request. I think that any investigation that is tax-funded should be released so that the community can see it. And so to answer your question, I didn't violate confidentiality. I didn't have an NDA. Again, if there's anything that I want to be remembered by when I retire, it's my integrity. And so my rationale for asking for the release of that report is because I know the truth, and I think it's time that everyone knows the truth too.
Thank you.
Please describe a specific situation where you had to lead your school or team through a crisis. What steps did you take to manage the situation, communicate with stakeholders, and support your community? What did you learn from this experience, and how has it influenced your approach to leadership?
Thank you for that question. So I'm actually living that right now. We had a substantial state adequacy aid reduction, and we also had an increase in our health insurance cost, 34.7% increase. And what we did was, when I first started, because I want to always try to live in a very proactive space. Typically, you know what your state adequacy aid is in November. You'll know what your health insurance costs will be in November. And we engaged, and we were preparing for what would come. So in late September and October, we engaged in a zero-based budgeting approach, which was brand new to the district. And essentially what that means is that instead of rolling over all of your line items from one year to the next, we said, okay, from scratch, we're going to justify every single expenditure. And that's very fiscally responsible. Every program, every expenditure had to be justified from the ground up. And that's what zero-based budgeting means. And that mattered because it forced honest conversations on impact, effectiveness, and alignment. And then, again, not knowing that we were facing a deficit, right? And then I said, okay, let's engage also, and this is with cabinet, let's engage with a tiered framework. Tier 1, what do we need to operate a safe and compliant school district? Essentially, what do we need to keep the doors open to our school district? Tier 1. And then we said, what do we need for Tier 2? And Tier 2 would essentially mean, important supports or how do we, strengthening instruction, but that could be scaled or redesigned, Tier 2. And then Tier 3 is our programs we could eliminate or we could just pause for a year depending on what our financial landscape looks the following year. The structure that we were doing was really shifting from what are we cutting and more into what are we protecting. It gave the district shared language around hard choices. And then throughout the process, transparency was non-negotiable. There were no surprises. We communicated early with the community when we found out that in November that we had a state adequacy aid reduction and that our health insurance costs had increased. We explained not just what decisions were being made, but why the decisions were being made and how they align with our priorities. The decisions were hard, there's no doubt about it, but because the process was inclusive, it was collaborative, it was values-driven, we were always making sure that everything we were funding was aligned to our district priorities. People may not have agreed with every decision, but they knew how the decisions were made. And I think the hardest part of a crisis like this is never the math. It's really honoring the people behind the numbers, and that's when real leadership shows up. Thank you for that question.
Ms. Lafave?
Thank you again for being here this evening. We'll conclude by giving you an opportunity to offer any final thoughts. Please share one or two key messages you would want this committee and the Holyoke community to remember about your leadership and why you believe you are the right person to lead Holyoke Public Schools at this moment.
Thank you for that question. Holyoke is at a defining moment, and moments like this don't happen often in a district's history, and they call for a specific kind of leadership. I'm a systems level leader. I design schools and districts grounded in dignity, belonging, and excellence. I don't just talk about equity, I operationalize it. I multiply leadership by developing people. I don't avoid hard conversations, I face them with integrity. And I move vision off of paper and into classrooms where children actually feel the impact. My leadership is shaped by serving children the system wasn't built for. That's why I start with access first. That's why I refuse to accept that zip code, disability, circumstance, or race determines destiny. Holyoke needs a leader that can hold steady and move the system forward. And that's the leadership that I bring. My promise to Holyoke is this: I will not come here to keep the lights on. I'll come here to design a future where every child is supported, known, challenged, and prepared to choose their own path. I believe that Holyoke does not need a caretaker. It needs an architect, and it's time to build. Thank you for the opportunity. I am humbled and grateful to be here.
On behalf of the school committee, I would like to thank Annie Azarloza for meeting with us this evening. Please join me in giving them another round of applause. As a reminder, this was our last finalist interview. The school committee will deliberate and vote in public following this interview. Thank you all for being with us this evening. I would also like to extend our sincere thanks to the Holyoke Public Schools custodial staff, Principal Lori McKenna, members of the communications team, members of the technology team and translation services, Mike Hines and Jenny Osterreicher, and Shayna Gubala and Irene Feliciano for their assistance and support throughout this entire process. I will now entertain a motion to recess for 10 minutes. Moved by Ms. Lafave, seconded by Ms. Tinsley-Williams. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It is 7:30, everybody, 10 minutes. Calling the meeting back to order at 7:47. Ms. Feliciano, roll call, please.
Mayor Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Veracalone.
Present.
Mr. Sheehan.
Present.
Ms. LaFave.
Present.
Ms. LeBron Martinez.
Here.
Ms. Tenzie Williams.
Aki.
Mr. Izaza.
Here.
Mr. Michelson.
Here.
Ms. LeBeau.
Here.
And Ms. Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, everybody. At this time, we're going to hear from our school committee members on their feedback from the site visits. We will start with Mr. Michelson.
So I was on a group of people that were interviewing groups that were selected by Ms. Glasheen. We interviewed 4 separate groups of people to investigate Ms. Glasheen, and the groups included students, the leadership at Peck Middle School, her direct reports, and teachers and administration at Dean Technical School. The reason for the groups that were selected were evident in the discussions that we had. The students all spoke praises for Mrs. Glasheen. Some of the students at Holyoke High had her as a principal in their earlier years. They spoke about her ability to see them as people, with many of the students saying that she had helped them get to and from school. One of the other things that came up often was the recognition that students have unique needs, and there was much focus on the whole child, which is a part of the strategic plan. They often spoke of their excitement to share events in their personal and academic lives with Mrs. Glasheen. Peck Middle School administration was chosen due to Mrs. Glasheen's involvement with the entirety of the project, from construction to staffing to budgetary constraints. The feedback from administration suggests that she was a great thought partner in all aspects of making the decisions. Her direct reports spoke a lot of Mrs. Glasheen's approach to solving problems. They described the most important aspect to her in solving problems as students first. It was mentioned that she uses this as her North Star, an asset for all major issues. Another notable thing that she was described was her leadership style enabled her to take large goals and put them into small chunks and leverage the use of data to arrive at targets in support of those goals. She's very organized and explicit with actions that need to be taken and open to providing support when asked. Finally, the Dean Technical team was very illustrative as well. Mrs. Glasheen was noted as an instrumental part of making vocational education viable from a budgetary standpoint, and was also offered a success path for all of our students. She was described as a coach for the teachers who were from a technical background and developing them into teachers. There were certain themes that appeared many times throughout the interviews that are crucial for mentioning. The most salient point among them are the description of her as, quote, Mrs. Holyoke, and the fact that she was very experienced in navigating relationships that she has developed over the course of her career in Holyoke. She was described as not only making those relationships, but also maintaining them. Finally, multiple people reported that she was sought out by families to attend IEP meetings that she would have otherwise not been invited to, which highlights her value not only as an advocate for students and parents, but also as a person who seeks to remedy situations involving the whole child.
Thank you, Mr. Michelson. Ms. Lubold.
Thank you. So we had the pleasure to meet with candidates that Ms. Annie Azarloza had arranged for us to meet. We interviewed about 13 folks last Friday, and they ranged, Mr. Michelson and Mr. Izaza were also on the call. And we interviewed individuals from New Hampshire and Worcester districts where Ms. Azarloza worked, such as principals and also an executive coach, a former superintendent, school board members, business managers, and a community member in Rochester. The 3 principals from the current district, this is a school district, and Ms. Azarloza mentioned about 500 people strong in the district. Ms. Azarloza has been there for 6 months, and she made an immediate impact in this small rural district near the Canadian border. They said that Annie quickly stabilized the business office within 6 months, drawing on her experience from larger districts, which had an immediate impact there. The elementary principal described her help in de-escalating a combative parent situation that made him feel calm versus feeling like he was putting his school on defense. And he also described the first meeting of the Leader Cabinet where Annie proactively brought up the elephant in the room, which was a reference to ongoing legal matters that she was facing in her district of Rochester, New Hampshire. And he felt the proactive gesture was valuable to him, that she did not try to hide the issue, and that created trust for him. She said, the other principals had said that Annie had laid out a case for how she would champion things and how she could not control outcomes, and she appreciated Annie's willingness to explain things and be very visible and transparent in all of her steps. The community member in Rochester, Annie, said that Annie brought positive changes to the district in the 6 months that she was the active superintendent before her leave. So the resident said before Annie's arrival there was a toxic work environment where teachers lacked growth, opportunities, and community involvement was lacking, and she felt that Annie brought in hope and engagement. The resident said that in her observation as a community member, Annie was challenging the culture and desire to change. And she said that Annie's efforts to implement necessary changes were thwarted due to resistance from a school board and some community members who protected the status quo. The resident also said that Annie's resignation from Rochester was a real setback to the community, and the community is still reeling from it. Asked with hindsight if there was anything that could have happened to change the situation where Annie could have stayed instead of leaving, the resident said no, and she added there was no reciprocal partnership with the school board, and the school board had an unwillingness to admit past mistakes. And when asked what Annie's community detractors would say about her role, she said they would just say lies. So the resident described the situation between the board and Annie as one where the board did not know their place. She said that the role confusion characterized as knowing your lane issues between the school board and the office of the superintendent. We also had the opportunity to speak with the former Worcester superintendent who hired Annie, and a manager who was also her current executive leadership coach. The former Worcester superintendent and Annie's executive coach spoke openly about Annie's strong community engagement skills and how she quickly built relationships with community members, municipal leaders, and other stakeholders. They underscored that she is comfortable connecting across languages because she is fluent in Spanish, and they believe she has a deep passion and commitment to students, and she's especially passionate about helping those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Her coach shared that she is drawn to the underdog. The former Worcester superintendent noted that when she hired Annie at Worcester Public Schools, Annie had instant likability and a collaborative leadership style that reached into the community, including with municipal leaders, and she was also coachable and open to feedback. The former superintendent said Annie routinely made efforts to work with stakeholders and community members. Her coach added that Annie has no fear of working with anyone. When asked about budgeting experience, the superintendent mentioned that Annie, who was leading academic support at the time, was an instrumental partner in helping her cut $20 million from the budget. Annie's former boss and current executive mentor cited areas of leadership growth opportunities for her. They named a tendency for her to move too fast to push change efforts more quickly than stakeholders might be able to absorb. And so their guidance to us would have been to go slower or to manage change more deliberately. They also shared that Annie is not a financial technical leader, and while she has experience in budget decision making, she will, as many superintendents do, rely on a strong CBO or fiscal team to oversee, support, and technical budgeting work. Lastly, we spoke with some central office staff and current school board members in the rural district at the Canadian border. Board members there say that Annie improved budget management, communication, and community collaboration in the short 6 months that she has been there. And her proactive efforts, like listening tours and student advisory councils, enhance transparency and professionalism. Though she hasn't faced a large town meeting yet where there would be hundreds of people there, the board appreciates her forward-thinking leadership and the confidence she instilled, including a clear exit plan. Should she leave, the chair noted, Annie was candid about challenges in Rochester which built trust, and board members also valued her communication, responsiveness, and said she took feedback well. The central office staff praised Annie's professionalism and work ethic, and they said that they would like to work for her again at some point if they ever had the opportunity. They thought that her bilingual skills were quite impressive, and her outside perspective has been seen as a positive after years of turnover. And while her departure would be a loss and they would have a bittersweet feeling, they always knew that she intended to go to Massachusetts.
Thank you. Mr. Michelson, your turn again.
Thank you. I had the opportunity with Mr. Azarloza and Ms. Lubold and a couple various people throughout the course of a day to interview people for Carmen Melendez-Quintero. The first group of people we interviewed were direct reports from the Boston Public Schools. So one of them referred to Ms. Quintero as the queen of MTSS, and she believed a lot. She comes from she's coaching right now, literacy in Boston. So she was very much involved in developing the coaches that would then deploy curriculum to the schools. One other note was that she was very thoughtful in probing for a root cause analysis before applying a solution and making sure that there were structural and sound solutions to those problems. She also was identified as being very good at making pivot points to know how to swing and how to change action if required. As far as stakeholder engagement, with her current role, she's not directly in charge of family input. She's in charge of inserting structural breaks for family engagement and prescribing them. That's what I got from the interview. It looks like she did look for opportunities she asked the question often who was not included in particular groups of people, and made an effort to break down barriers to make sure that they were involved in decision making. In another subset of interviews, we interviewed two people from the Worcester School District that she was working with. They mentioned her strong counseling background and that she was an outside-the-box thinker, and she brought dual language in a different capacity to Worcester and brought a conference to Worcester that really put Worcester on the map as a model for dual language programs. She's a very strategic thinker, and she, in Boston right now, has worked on merging two schools and has looked to relay the needs to the district from the families in that situation. And she spent a lot of time understanding community. When asked what she would do to build community, she said the direct response was that the first thing she would do is learn everything about the community and the subcommunities within it. She's got big ideas and great preparation and is very good at implementation. Finally, no, that pretty much covers my two interviews on that day.
Thank you, Mr. Michelson. At this time, I will give every committee member time to speak about the candidates, and then we will proceed to voting, which I will explain after everybody gets a chance to speak. Mayor Garcia.
I gotta get used to holding this button here. What an incredible job, the candidates that were brought forward in this whole process. I've had the honor of meeting with all three candidates for a whole 30 minutes. It's the fastest 30 minutes that I've ever experienced ever. And even within those 30 minutes, the unique perspective each one had offered and the energy that they brought was just very impressive and made me feel very hopeful after the night. I could tell you the first candidate that we interviewed, Melendez, right? Carmen, Mrs. Melendez. The fact that her experience in Worcester, I remember when we were doing this and we went out to Worcester and we interviewed Dr. Paez and we learned about the dual language program and was really one of the many reasons why. And here we are now today, fast forward, with a very robust dual language program, and she, in fact, helped expand it over there in Worcester and continue to do work. So it's just kind of great to know that, it's just kind of great to see that turn around and know that if this is a potential win here, that we'll continue this important program that's loved by a lot of people in our community. And also she asked about, it's just, hey, what does the relationship look between the municipality and the school district, which I thought was a great question when we met, beyond just what happens, right, as a manager inside the district, working with the teachers and trying to achieve student outcomes and meeting community needs. It was, how does that relationship look like, and how do we work together to help continue to support the district, just on the municipal lens, which I thought was really neat, and we had a pretty neat conversation around that. Mrs. Glasheen, 30 minutes. I've known Mrs. Glasheen for a very long time, so it was, I don't want to say difficult, but when you kind of already know so much. However, I will say that with Mrs. Glasheen, the question I asked her was, you've been in the district for for a while, and keeping your finger on the pulse, we know how certain groups in our district feel about the current administration coming out of receivership in this transition, of whether or not there was collaboration and unity between our stakeholders. And Mrs. Glasheen just had a great answer. She gave a lot of credit to the administration, strongly believes the direction we're going is a good one, and she contributed to that team. Certainly, as leader, trying to build upon that foundation that we've already established, transitioning out of receivership into local control, and now under new leadership, kind of just building on that momentum and doing what we can through the lens of what she knows already have been working in the district, growing up through the ranks, from her earlier time starting in the district to now, in her current role, and then even serving as principal, everything in between. She certainly knows, has a very strong perspective of what's going on. And as the final candidate, Azarloza, or Azarloza, how do you pronounce it?
Azarloza.
Another excellent conversation. And mind you, with all three candidates, I could tell you consistently across the board, each one has brought up, based on their own collective knowledge and research and what they know, has identified a potential weakness in our district is trying to figure out how to be better in how we're providing services to our children with special needs, the special education. And I think we've kind of already had some sense of that from previous conversations, but it was good to see that the research was being done and that there was a priority set by the potential next leader to put that in the forefront and finally get moving the needle a little bit and do better on that. There was some concern that I think you've probably touched a little bit on. It sounds like you might have even talked about it in the interview, that had brought up prior to the interview about some issue that came up, which we talked about at length. And it turns out, this candidate's a fixer. She likes to go in and solve problems. And just from my own personal experience, when you go from, when I was in Blandford to just kind of even today is here, when I was at PVPC, and you're trying to work with local governments, understand best practices, how you improve the systems, you know, when things are in disarray and you're brought into, there's resistance in that process, and you know, it's part of the stages of a community trying to overcome and understand and acknowledge and get to a point where there's alignment and achieving shared progress. And so it was great just being able to talk at length about the experience in New Hampshire, going into a challenging district that has been used to a certain way, and being able to just kind of dive into that and do what they can in their capacity, not from there, doesn't know anybody, not politically connected, and trying to be a change agent. That can be a very difficult environment to navigate, for sure. But I got to say, I know it was a quick 30 minutes, but very impressed with all three. And that's my report in the interviews.
Thank you. Ms. Densley Williams.
This is a very tough decision. I've never had to make a decision like this a lot of times in my life. They were all excellent. It's tough. It's almost like a stalemate. But I know we do have to make a decision tonight. So I guess I don't know if I should say it now or. Okay, we're going to be voting, but I'll just leave that alone. But I thank you all for coming, and I had a great time. Thank you so much, and may the best one win. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
Great, we're just going to go in order. All right. So first, I want to thank all the candidates who expressed interest in our position as a superintendent in Holyoke. I think it takes courage to put yourself out there in this type of public forum. It takes courage to apply for a position in a district like ours coming out of receivership. So again, I applaud all the candidates, and for those who made it to the final interview, it was an engaging couple of evenings listening to your perspectives. I find that each candidate had their, some particular strengths to draw on, that each candidate could make an impact on our district. So there, in my mind, there is no bad choice, but there is also a choice in my mind that is clear for who is the right person for the city of Holyoke as the next candidate. And this is based upon the questions that were posed to each candidate and my note-taking that I took.
Excuse me, Ms. Wilson. I think that might be easier to use so that you don't have to hold it the whole time.
Are we there now? Thank you. For those who know me, if we weren't on TV, well, on Zoom, you would know I could speak without this microphone. So, but for me, as I was saying, I think based upon the notes I took, the process that was put in front of us, like I said, there is one candidate who stands out in my mind based upon her background. And so, but once again, thank you to all the candidates. As I said, this is a very challenging process, and we appreciate all of your interest and your time with our community. Thank you.
Ms. Lubo?
Thank you. I would echo what was said before about the strong candidates, and I especially want to just spend a few minutes just sharing how valuable I found it to listen to the interviews and the site visits and other people's perspectives that were living with the candidates in their own element, and could talk about them as leaders, as people who knew them and worked alongside of them, and I found that that was a really extremely valuable part of the process. For me, as I sit here, I do feel that although we have 3 strong candidates, there is one candidate and only one candidate that has accurately portrayed the situation before our district. The simple fact of the matter is that we are not out of receivership. We have exit assurances that are on us for the next 18 months. And anybody that assumes a leadership role in this community as a superintendent is going to have to deal with current practices, programming that they may not like, but they will have to continue because that is the way forward. The objective before us and to pick a leader at this moment is to pick a leader who is going to get us out of receivership and really embrace local control so that we as Holyoakers can lift our community up together. There was only one candidate who mentioned continuity, who mentioned the understanding before our community, because that candidate is living it and has been living it. So when I think about what Holyoke needs next and what we need to do as a board, we need to understand the mission before us. Lastly, what I'll say, and this is very important to us as a governance board, and this is not something that I take lightly in saying, but we have a fiduciary obligation of care to our community. And when we are inviting reputational risk, when one candidate is embroiled in a recent lawsuit, as recent as was filed as last week by a former municipality that she worked for, that is a troubling circumstance. We are a community that is besieged, oftentimes by negative news, embroiled in controversy. And so I ask us to think about, or have we thought about, what does that mean in continuing someone else's legacy that may be fixed and be fine? But is this what we need at this moment to lead our city forward? And I just ask us, have we thought about that as a new board? Again, trying to come out of receivership and make solid decisions about who will lead us forward and to keep our responsibility on student outcomes and to our community. Thank you.
Mr. Michelson?
I'd like to take a second thank you to all the candidates and a big thank you to the screening committee who gave us the 3 best candidates we could have possibly asked for. You guys did an awesome job, and it was very apparent, right? The 3 candidates who sat here, right? One was an expert in social work, right? Nailed it. Community needs somebody who's socially sensitive, right? Somebody who understands inequity, somebody who's willing to put their foot down and make things better for all students. I saw that in Carmen Melendez-Cotero. And that was a lot of what I saw with her, right? I don't know, actually I'll move on to Ms. Glasheen, right? The quote of Mrs. Holyoke, right? I thought a lot about what does our district need right now? We have people who are familiar with our district, right? Who are familiar with the challenges of being in Holyoke. We have a Mrs. Holyoke. That's worth a lot in this situation when you're talking about exiting from state control, when you're talking about what the next steps are for the district, what kind of vision you have, and communicating that, and have been communicating it to everybody all the way up. That's not lost on me. And as a result, I'm sorry, somebody say that. Well, the candidate tonight, she was excellent. She was very flashy. She was very good with systems work. I was very impressed with her in a lot of different ways. But I'm not sure that, as Ms. Lubold mentioned, I'm not sure that I can get around to the idea of having a liability to our students or to our community. We need somebody strong who understands what's going on right now in every classroom. Somebody who will hug our kids, somebody who will see them for who they are and who has seen them for who they are and
has lived through tragedies and all the other things that have happened in this community for years. So thanks a lot to all the candidates. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Mr. Izaza.
We have, I think, three excellent candidates. They're all very knowledgeable, highly experienced, with a deep commitment to the students and teachers. All of them demonstrated some clarity about the importance of evidence-based research behind everything that is done. Clearly committed to community engagement and family involvement. So, frankly, other than the comments previously made, I think we are gifted with three excellent candidates, and I think whomever is actually chosen would be good for Holyoke.
Ms. Lebron Martinez.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the audience and those who are watching at home. I listened very carefully to these three candidates, tremendous, amazing feedback to our questions. But as I recollect being here, having 4 children who graduated from our Holyoke public system, my oldest is 48 years old. Many of the issues that are being addressed over and over in this community have been here for years, where if we still in the challenges of our children's not graduating, accessing opportunities to colleges, and the other isms that exist in our system, doesn't matter who comes on board and doesn't take the torch the way that we need to, we're going to be in the same. I die and my grandchildren will see it. Not only do I have 4 children who graduated from here, 9 grandkids involved, and 2 who may possibly one day be in the system. And for me, everything, in paper looks good. And of course, we did the process of the interviews. But at the same time, I am going to look for what is in the best interest of our children and our families, so that we can see at least one day before I pass the changes that these children deserve in these families and the community. So thank you all.
Thank you. Ms. Lefebvre.
Just checking to see if you really want to hear what I have to say. I'm trying to think how to say it in the most polite and political way. I am grateful for the 3 candidates that did come forward, or that was presented by the committee, the search committee. But I'm going to reflect back on the community advisory team that was developed when we were looking at getting out of receivership. And the many people that were involved and attended the sessions and gave their feedback on what they were looking for a leader. I still recall the day when we were hearing that we were going to get out of receivership. What was the first thing out of everybody's mouth? We got to hurry up and hire a new superintendent for July 1st. Just like our students that struggle with mental health, our students that struggle with disabilities, transitioning constantly is an impact, can make a negative impact on them. The same thing happens now during our transition, which we're not fully out of receivership, in my opinion, transitioning so much. And sometimes I feel that this process was kind of rushed. For what purpose? What purpose are we here for? I'm still trying to figure that one out. And I mean, I have so much that I could say, but I'm just not going to say it. But I am grateful for the woman, for the candidate that was just here. Because you know what? A lot of us have skeletons in our closet, right? At least she's forthcoming to it, and she'll call it out. We shouldn't already judge without knowing. Plus, you can't convict without having the evidence. That's my personal opinion. But going back to leadership and who we need right now, going back to the community advisory team's report, they wanted somebody who understood Holyoke, someone who lives in Holyoke, someone who speaks Spanish. They wanted someone that was really willing to take risks. There was so much to it, but the key component of it was who knows Holyoke. We always say we don't need somebody to come and save us. We need somebody to come and work with us. We don't need saving. Our kids don't need saving. They want somebody who cares, somebody who's empathetic, and somebody who really looks at them like they can succeed. That's what they want. So good luck to the 3 candidates, and all the best for our city. You have your own microphone.
Someone's fired up at 8:30. Yeah. So I do appreciate what all my fellow members said and all their comments, and how much I appreciate the people who we got to interview these past 3 nights. Let's also, though it won't be a first for Holyoke, but we will be choosing another permanent female superintendent, which I think is pretty huge that we've had 3 female finalists out of this pool. So I am going to talk a little bit about some of the qualities of each of the candidates, because I think that they put themselves on display for us for 2-3 weeks and went through this whole process, and just want to talk about some of the things that I saw out of them. I'll just go in order of the night that they interviewed. We met with Ms. Melendez Quintero, and what I saw in her were true qualities of supporting MLL students and ensuring that all students are ready and prepared to lead. She brought a huge commitment to SEL and often talked about MTSS in her interview. I do feel as though that some of her weaknesses in here was not a direct leadership role in school management. She lacked some readiness to be in Holyoke, and let's just own it. Holyoke is a difficult place to lead in and a difficult place to teach in. No matter what position you're in, there are challenges here, and there are not just one crisis going on once a week. There's 7 fires going every hour, and I think that she is a high-quality leader. I'm just not sure that Holyoke is a right fit. There's somewhere that's a right fit for her, because she definitely has the passion to be a leader and to support public school students and ensure that students have opportunities. We had the opportunity to meet with Mrs. Glasheen on Wednesday, and once again, it was a very strong interview, and it was obviously knows the Holyoke system, has been here for many years, and I think that is a great testament to what, as my colleague said, the Community Advisory Committee was looking for. I think that there are some challenges. Her greatest strengths, I think, sometimes can also be some great weaknesses. I think that knowing that having a familiarity with the district sometimes makes it more difficult to lead change. And if selected, I think that she will rise to that occasion to ensure that she is leading with courage and conviction and doing the things that Holyoke needs to move forward and to move forward over the next 18 months to not have renewed exit assurances. And there was a true commitment that every day of her work is to make not just the Holyoke Public Schools but the city a better place, and that was shown on Wednesday with that. And also was the only candidate that spoke directly towards the entry plan and provided that to the committee to get started at the start of the term. Our last candidate tonight, Ms. Azarloza, was also another strong candidate. I think that she brought, she led in some very unique areas, from a charter school to a very rural school district where she is now, to a little bit more urban district. And she definitely brought some experience that I was looking for, similar to last night's candidate, with school building leadership, being able to, having the history of being a principal, assistant superintendent, so on, and those areas. I am slightly concerned with some of the things in the past, but I also know that the minute someone gets the title superintendent, that everything is on their shoulders, and that sometimes there's bad press, sometimes things don't go your way. Like, there's lots of issues when you become a superintendent, and I recognize that every superintendent and anyone sitting at this table could all have things put in them in the paper, and we have to sift through the right and the wrong with that. And I think that she, once again, could be a very strong leader somewhere with that, and definitely has a passion, once again, for ensuring that every student is able to learn and have what they need around them. And I think that we'll be in good hands tonight with the decision that the school committee makes. I also recognize that there's only, I think, 2 of us at this table that were here 12 years ago making this decision, and it was the last time we went through a search, and this is such a huge, huge opportunity for our city. And just like many, many years ago when we had to make a pivotal decision for the future of Holyoke, I stand by the decision and the vote that I took then for change in Holyoke, and I will stand by the decision that I take tonight with the person that I think will be the best leader for the district.
Thank you. When the community advisory team came on board and they put together what the profile of the next superintendent would be, and very much how Ms. LaFay was talking about those qualities that the next superintendent, that we were looking as a community for the next superintendent, I'm gonna say that I think we have a great slew of candidates. They're strong. We're not gonna be able to fulfill all of the things that the community advisory team put forward. And I say that because there would be very few people in the world probably who could really fit every box from that community advisory team. But I will say that the screening committee, thank you, all of you, because you really did a hard job and made our job harder in a good way, because we have 3 candidates that had leadership skills, and even though not all of them can tick all the boxes, they tick enough boxes to be here tonight for our consideration. We have, if we could have a merger between the awesome community engagement from Annie Azarloza and the counseling background from Carmen Julissa Melendez Quintero and the institutional and community knowledge from Ms. Glasheen, we could have the most perfect superintendent that there could be. But that's not what we have. We have 3 candidates who each bring their own strengths and things that they will be able to bring to Holyoke, and we will have to make a decision. And this is, and I don't say this lightly, this is gonna be a really hard decision, but we're all, and I speak, I think, for everybody in this board, that we do it because whatever decision we make tonight is gonna be what we think is in the best interest of the children of Holyoke. I also want to say thank you to every member of our school committee, as well as the finalists and the screening committee and the community advisory team, but especially to the members on this stage, because I know that you had lots of competing priorities, you had lots of things that you had to do, and you made time for site visits, Mr. Michelson was one who was in every site visit. And I know that he had a lot of competing priorities and things that he needed to do. The same with Ms. Lubel, the same with Mr. Isaza, Ms. Tensley Williams. They were able to be there representing us because not everybody could go to everything. But we're a great team, and I commend all of you for, again, being here tonight, taking this seriously and doing the best that you can, which is all that we can ask for. So thank you so much.
I'd like to make a motion to go to the first round of voting.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. So I'm going to explain what the ballot looks like. So for each of the committee members, you will have a space to write your name, and then all you have to do is circle the candidate that you're voting for. So I'm going to get my steps in, and I'm going to give you your ballots. Once you're done, fold your paper so that I can know that you're done. And then I'll pick up and read them out loud. I need to be able to vote too. Hold on. Right. Do I have to go in order?
No, you just.
Okay. All right. Mayor Garcia, Jackie Glasheen, Ms. Lubold, Jackie Glasheen, Ms. Wilson, Jackie Glasheen, Ms. Tensley Williams, Jackie Glasheen, Mr. Michelson, Jackie Glasheen, Mr. Isaza, Carmen Melendez Quintero, Ms. Lebron Martinez, Annie Azarloza, Ms. Lefebvre, Jackie Glasheen, Mr. Sheehan, Jackie Glasheen, yours truly, Jackie Glasheen. Mr. Sheehan.
I'd like to make a motion to make the decision of the school committee unanimous.
Second.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Mayor Garcia. And what do we do? All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Mr. Sheehan.
I'd like to make a motion that the school committee take a brief recess so the chair can contact the candidate and see if they conditionally accept the offer.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Ms. Wilson. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved. We're officially at recess. and it is 8:37. Roll call, Ms. Feliciano.
Mayor Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Rick Colon.
Present.
Mr. Sheehan.
Present.
Ms. LaFave.
Present.
Ms. Navarro Martinez.
Here.
Ms. Tensley Williams.
Aki.
Mr. Izaza.
Present.
Mr. Michelson.
Here.
Ms. LeBeau.
Here.
And Ms. Wilson.
Present.
Upon our brief conversation, Ms. Glasheen is excited to start and has accepted pending negotiations of the contract. Mr. Sheehan,
I'd like to make a motion to direct the chair to begin the contracting process.
motion made by Mr. Sheehan, seconded by Ms. LaFave. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved. Ms. LaFave on the motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Izaza. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. This concludes our search for our next superintendent. It is 8:41.